Peace, family. It's your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. Welcome to another episode of Night School. Every night here on the channel, the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel, we have Night School where we don't do cable news drive-bys. We don't do podcasts, talking points. Instead, we have deep, thorough conversations about the most pressing issues going on in the world around us. And today, we are joined by a very special guest. We are joined by Congressman Jamaal Bowman. You know him. He represents New York City. He is a member of the squad. He is one of the progressive voices in the U.S. Congress, and he is in the midst of a heated, I would say, shockingly and unnecessarily heated primary battle with a gentleman named George Latimer. We'll talk all about it. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Of course, brother. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
The first thing I got to ask you is, why the heck are you in such an intense primary battle? I mean, usually the primary season, once you win your district, is light work. Usually you campaign, you let people know you're there. But it looks like there are people, not on the right exclusively, but on the right and the left, the so-called left, who are trying to stop you from having another term in Congress. What the heck is going on?
I called for a ceasefire, called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza pretty early on. Actually, I think 9 days after October 7th. Of course, we condemned the atrocities of October 7th, the killing of civilians. But right after that, like the next day, we had a resolution at our desk that I know was written by AIPAC that talked about, condemning October 7th. And it said a whole bunch of other things that I just couldn't get down with, that I thought was a misrepresentation of, the context there and the conditions there on the ground in the West Bank, Gaza, and Israel. And so I did not support that resolution. But 9 days later, my sisters, Cori Bush and Rashida Tlaib, co-led a resolution called the ceasefire resolution that completely aligned with, my values and common sense, quite frankly, and common decency, in which they acknowledged not just the atrocities of October 7th, but the atrocities that came right after that. I mean, if you remember, Benjamin Netanyahu, President Herzog, and leaders in the Israeli government was saying all kind of wild things like right after, and then they went on the attack, cutting off food, water, electricity, using white phosphorus, talking about there's no innocent civilians, talking about remember what Amalek did to you, et cetera, et cetera. So it was that was kind of the last straw. I mean, prior to that, I had been, critical of Israel in terms of how our military aid was being used. We co-sponsored Betty McCollum's bill that pretty much said, hey, if we give y'all $3.8 billion a year, you can't be using it to detain women and children unjustly in the West Bank. And then remember who I beat in 2020, Elliot Engel. He was their number one champion.
He was a hawk. He was a pro-Israel hawk.
Straight hawk, straight pro-Israel hawk, chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. So pretty much since we won in 2020, they've been looking for an opportunity to do what they're doing right now.
Now, when we say they, I want to make sure the language is clarified, because people will take words out of context. When you say that they are doing what they're doing, who is the they that's trying to get you out of office?
I guess broadly speaking, the quote-unquote pro-Israel lobby. But the organization that's driving this race is an organization called AIPAC, AIPAC, American Israeli PAC. And their only issue is Israel. That's what they lobby members of Congress on. And pretty much they want to make sure that Israel continues to receive the $3.8 billion a year that they get from Congress, and is very rarely, if ever, criticized for its treatment of Palestinians. That's pretty much AIPAC's job. And so they do not want Jamaal Bowman to represent this district anymore, and they have somebody else. And it's also important to note, remember, Elliot Engel was here for 30 years. Nita Lowey was right next door for 30 years. So this is a very AIPAC, pro-Israel, for lack of a better term, district in many ways when you consider New York City, but also Westchester County and Rockland County.
When AIPAC makes a decision to go against you and undermine your campaign, there was a time where people said, it's over, right? There was a time where AIPAC seemed unbeatable. But in recent years, AIPAC has had some losses, whether it was, fighting the Iran nuclear deal or whether it was trying to get certain politicians primaried. What's going on with AIPAC? Is your sense that AIPAC is not as strong as they were, or am I being overconfident?
Well, I think, honestly, the incredible scholarship and research of people like you and others, that have illuminated what's been going on in Israel for several decades, I think has demystified a lot of it and helped us to understand sort of what's happening there. And now that you have people like me in Congress, people like Rashida Tlaib, who's a Palestinian woman, Ilhan Omar, who's a Muslim woman from Somalia, and others like AOC Ayana and others, you have new sort of working class voices who are unapologetic and fighting for racial justice, both here and around the world. So I think it's we're more educated, things are more demystified, and so we speak about it more. And when I'm stand up for Palestinian rights, I'm not thinking about AIPAC. I'm just trying to stand up. I'm trying to speak up for justice. I'm trying to speak up for human rights. I do the same thing when I talk about Uyghur persecution in China, or child slavery in the Congo, or what's happening in Sudan, or United Fruit in Guatemala, and right. So we're fighting for human rights regardless, and so. I'm not thinking about AIPAC. I know the squad ain't thinking about them. We're just fighting for human rights. But in terms of just AIPAC's political strength, I think there's been a grassroots movement probably before the Bernie run in 2016. But I think that was kind of like a big jumping off point in terms of electoral politics in Congress to really build a grassroots infrastructure around the Working Families Party, the Justice Democrats, Sunrise Movement, and other orgs here and nationally that I think already just pushed back against, the lot of propaganda and the dishonesty that comes from not just AIPAC, but the fossil fuel lobby, pharmaceutical companies. Like we're going after big money in politics, and we're going after special interests for the most part. And the grassroots has been strong. That's why AIPAC, I think, in this race, they're trying to say, like, you know what? We're going to double and triple down. We're going to spend more money against Jamaal.
$25 million.
Yeah.
Is that right? Is that number accurate from what $25 million is being spent?
Yes. Yeah, I think it might be above that. But I know a couple weeks ago they spent $10 million in a 4-week period to just bombard my district with just ads, advertisements on broadcast, on cable, on digital. And then they also spent a lot of money on mailers because, during the election season, you get a bunch of mail. One time I picked up the mail, dog. It was like this thick. And I just laid it out on the bed and took a picture of it. It was 12 mailers and 8 were anti-Bowman. And
wow.
So they hit you with the mailers. They hit you with the ads. And again, the subterfuge, right? The ads ain't about Israel. The ads are about a vote I took 3 years ago or the bill that passed, but they're, brainwashing people into thinking it's the worst vote ever taken in history. And so, we got to get this guy out of Congress.
Now, you say they're anti-Bowman bill or anti-Bowman flyers, anti-Bowman messaging. It is a very different approach you can take, right? There's the don't vote for Bowman, which is what you seem to be describing, but there's also the vote for the other guy. And it seems like a lot of the opposition against you is not because there's a belief that there's a better opponent, which there could be, right? There's always a possibility there's a better opponent, but simply not this guy. So when I see George Latimer's campaign, I'm a little confused. What is it that he's bringing to the table? What is it that who is he, and what does he bring to the table, and why is he being positioned as your opponent?
He's pro-Israel. That's what he brings to the table for AIPAC, and so that's why they're funding him this way. For others in the district who want to pretend that it's not only about that, he's been in elected office 35 years. He served at every level of government. He's currently the county executive. He's a very good, what they call retail politician. So he will have coffee with every Democratic leader multiple times over and make them feel good about themselves and the work that they're doing. So he brings a level of comfort to those who do not want disruption. and those who want to remain comfortable. That's who he is. That's what he represents.
So he sounds qualified. There's a but, though.
Well, because when you look at his record, particularly for marginalized groups, for working class people, for Black and brown folk, there's absolutely no record there, and I would argue there's even a disdain there. You know, when you're county executive of Westchester County, you have a very big budget, $2.3 billion, and you have the bully pulpit, and you're in an executive position where you could set the agenda. So you could do a lot for the marginalized areas of your county, and he just doesn't have a record of doing that. You know, when you look at during his tenure, taxes have gone up 20% in Yonkers and 40% in Mount Vernon. Those are the two blackest, brownest, working classes areas of the county. And they've gone down in Rye, where he lives, and they've gone down in Scarsdale, which is one of the wealthiest areas in the country. That's number one. Number two, you know, the issue of affordable housing is a crisis across the country, but it's really a crisis in Westchester County. People can't afford to live here. We need about 12,000 units. He hasn't shown any leadership or taken any real action in that regard as well. And then going back to the issue of just race and class, 14% of the children in Westchester County are Black. They make up 62% of children in childhood detention centers. And he's on track to build another. And so he's the quintessential, what used to be called moderate, what I think is more conservative Democrat, you know, cut from the cloth of the Eric Adams of the world, and, you know, people like that who, you know, want to fund the police and don't really have a vision or understanding of a true holistic approach to public safety, for example, via social determinants of health and all those things. He just doesn't have that, and he's a traditional politician, you know, pay-to-play politician. You know, you make a donation to my campaigns, you know, we give you contracts, and most of those contracts aren't going to be for Black and brown people. So that's who he really is. And again, he also supporting the genocide in Gaza because, you know, AIPAC and other pro-Israel lobbies pull the strings in politics in Westchester, but also throughout the country.
I'm not surprised that your opposition would have a different position than you on Israel-Palestine. That makes sense. If that's why people are producing an alternative option, it's because they see the world differently. And I understand that person would be well-funded. I think the thing that was a little surprising to me, just a little bit, was the fact that former Secretary of State and former First Lady Hillary Clinton would intervene in this election and support your opponent. Why is Hillary Clinton involved in this?
She lives in Westchester County. She lives in Chappaqua, which is probably one of the wealthiest areas in the county. And he's a candidate for the wealthy, right? And so that whole AIPAC, pro-Israel, conservative Zionist network, she's down with that, and he's down with that, and AIPAC's down with that. So they roll together. You know what I mean? So I'm not that surprised, but I think it illustrates.
Stay out of it. I mean, I could see if y'all were both vying for an empty seat, but you have been in office. You've been successful. Voters like you. You're known across the nation, and she's supposed to be the kind of steward of a progressive political party, allegedly.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good word, steward. You know, one of my frustrations since getting to Congress is the lack of mentorship and embracing of the squad that I think is necessary for the health and well-being of our democracy long term. I mean, take me out of it. The squad is dope. I mean, we're talking about 6, 7, 8 sisters, couple Muslim, incredible thinkers, humanitarians, leaders, etc. That's what the Democrat Party should be doing, everything in their power to surround them. Again, take me out of it and support their continued growth for the party and for the country. But that
was the leadership of the party involved in that? For example, was Hillary Clinton, or I'd also add Joe Biden to that, or just senior senators in the Congress? Were they supportive of the squad? Have they been mentoring, supporting, fundraising, for the squad outside of Bernie, maybe?
Yeah, Bernie for sure, Warren for sure, Senator Warren for sure, Hakeem as well to a certain extent. I don't know how much fundraising he's done with other members, but supportive, yes. I mean, Hakeem just creates a space for all of our voices to be valued and uplifted, and I really appreciate him for that. So somewhat, yes. Even Speaker Pelosi did do a little something like that, but it's been a struggle with the White House. You know what I mean? It's been a struggle with obviously people like the Clintons of the world. I mean, I don't know why to me, it's just a political thing. I mean, it's obviously the pro-Israel thing, but it's a political thing in terms of, no disrespect, but, in our district, it's a majority minority district. It leans left mostly. She's kind of inconsequential in the district. And so just to create at this point in the race, you want to create momentum going into election day, right? And so she was part of his creating momentum to kind of get him more votes, or as many votes as possible going into election.
Wow. That's just stunning to me. The voting base of the district you're saying is progressive, more progressive than Latimer. It sounds like the wedge issue here is Israel-Palestine. But it doesn't sound like it's purely Jewish voters doing this. It sounds like the Clintons or Hillary Clinton, to be specific, is leveraging her power just to kind of pull progressive voters toward the center again. And that seems like unhealthy for the life of the Democratic Party if they're attempting to articulate a truly progressive vision or even a liberal vision of what the world could look like. If we take Israel-Palestine off the table for a minute, how progressive is the party and how progressive is the squad? And what is the relationship between those two things? I know there's some diversity even in and among the squad members.
Yeah, it's a great question. The party, if we take it from a Joe Biden perspective, right, is pretty progressive at this moment outside of Israel-Palestine.
Including Biden? Would you consider Biden progressive?
Yeah, and I'm going to say a couple of points about that. But the one area where we're not still is with policing in the justice system. Like the party still, is playing this, who's tougher on crime kind of thing, right? And who loves police more. So that continues to be a problem. That continues to be a problem for the party and for President Biden, in my opinion. I mean, the pieces of legislation that move most swiftly through the House are pro-police pieces of legislation and pro-Israel. Other pieces do not move that swiftly. And Mark, when I say swiftly, before we go to Washington for our week in session, we get like an agenda or a calendar of like the topics we're going to vote on, what's going to be debated, what rules we get all that before we get there. We can get there and Israel not be on the calendar, and then something will happen, and there all of a sudden a resolution or something is written, and we voting on that joint the next day. Like that's how Israel moves, and that's how policing bills move. But in terms of, let's say, taxing the rich, for example, taxing the wealthy, the president is behind that. Like the president has pushed taxing corporations at a higher rate, taxing the wealthy at a higher rate. My opponent does not support that. He wants to remain with the Trump tax cuts from, 2017, I think, minus the salt deduction. And so, but most Democrats support raising taxes on the wealthy. So he's even to the right of the party on that particular issue. Of course, he loves police. Of course, he loves our justice system. And so, outside policing, outside Israel, the party is pretty progressive, but we still love police and we still love Israel.
What does it mean to love police in terms of policy? Like, let me ask it a better way. What would a progressive policy around criminal justice, criminal legal system look like?
And then qualified immunity, declassifying marijuana from a level 1 drug, and providing amnesty in response to that. What else? Qualified immunity is a big one.
Can you break that down for my audience? There's some people who don't know qualified immunity.
Yeah, so just when a police officer violate someone's civil rights, they can be accountable for that through a lawsuit from a private citizen. Right now, that's not the case. Right now, police officers can violate someone's civil rights and not be held accountable by the private citizen, and even worse, taxpayer money will go towards defending this officer if they are held accountable internally or through some other third party situation. And so what we have is like a place like New York City and other places, there's like a bank account of taxpayer money to defend a police officer if they are if an attempt to hold them accountable is put forth. And this is really crazy because we have situations where officers routinely are not held accountable, and we have continued police brutality across the country. And so ending qualified immunity is a big part of it. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act was a step in the right direction, major step in the right direction. But by the time it got to the Senate and was being negotiated by Tim Scott and Cory Booker, qualified immunity came out. And even when we tried to move forward without that, it was stopped by sheriffs in South Carolina who told Tim Scott he better not. And so, yeah, man, the policing thing is real. Like they're again, this is like they're organized. They have a strong union, well-funded union. And then it's like, it's this idea that if you're against police, you're okay with crime, which is totally not true. So anyway, and thank you for your work in that area as well, of like giving us a vision of what a world post-police could look like.
We've tried to do that. And I think after the George Floyd moment in 2020, a lot of us said, okay, now's an opportunity from Minnesota to New Jersey, to say, what could a vision of defunding look like? Joe Biden has been very clear saying he doesn't support defunding police. In fact, he wants to double down on funding police. And that's become, as you pointed out, a mainstream theme among many Democrats. Do you out and out support defunding police? Is that an actual strategy that you advocate for?
I wouldn't use the word defunding. I usually say reallocating resources. So as opposed to just, because defunding sounds to people, it sounds like, oh, you just want to take money away. Yes, but it's take money away and put it towards mental health supports, substance abuse supports, more social services, housing, education, like, again, responding to the actual things that lead to harm in the first place. Police, at best, they respond to, violent crime, arrest someone, put them in jail, and that's kind of what they're there for. But what we have right now is them responding to all kind of minor things that could be dealt with by other agencies, other people. And if we dealt with the issue of poverty, concentrated poverty, and many of the other social determinants of health, police would have less to respond to in the first place, which is the goal. So yes, defund the police, but it has to be, the resources need to be reallocated towards areas of great need.
When I think about all of this stuff, sounds pretty progressive. You seem to be on the right side of these issues. But I remember about a year ago, there was some tension between you and Democratic Socialists of America, DSA. There were some people who were saying he's not progressive enough. Now, there's a way that, falling out with the Democratic Socialists of America might be good for your campaign right now, who you're fighting against. But it's an interesting thing to think about. What were you not doing that made some folks say he ain't on the right side of the issues? What was it that made people say maybe he's not us anymore? He's not like us.
Yeah, that's hilarious, actually. First of all, I didn't think this then, but I'm thinking now, I think there's some like AIPAC infiltration in DSA and or some COINTELPRO type situation, because it was wild how it happened. So I was criticized for going to Israel and meeting with Israeli leaders while in Israel. And just to be clear, DSA is a decentralized organization. And so you can have like DSA Las Vegas pop off on Jamaal Bowman in New York, even though the New York DSAs are cool with me. You know what I'm saying? And so what happened there was, I went to Israel, met with Israeli leaders, met with Palestinian leaders also, met with Breaking the Silence and other scholars, met with all kinds of people. But the fact that I met with Israeli leaders, they felt I was giving credibility to the Israelis by meeting with them. Now, my perspective on that was like, shit, I want to have equity, and I want to be able to provide evidence when I talk about an issue, and I want to be able to sit with someone, look them in the eye, and ask them about two-state solution, settlement expansion, etc., and get their reaction in real time. So now I can be like, then I can make a determination, like a judgment, right? Right. And so anyway, but to them it was like, you met with them, you went there, you're not like us. And so the social media campaign started with I guess it was a Palestinian sort of subcommittee within DSA that was, again, outside New York, that caused this like social media campaign that led to a couple of articles and led to like the falling out at that time. So that was
in fairness, there were some other issues too, right? I mean, one of the questions was Iron Dome funding.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So you at one point did support Iron Dome funding. Yes. Why did you, and where do you stand now?
Yeah. So it was, Iron Dome is a defense system, and I supported it at the time because I don't want to send the message that I think it's okay for Jews to be killed, right? Because I don't. And so I definitely don't want to send a message at that time, and that's why I voted yes on that. Now, with them, Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu committing a genocide on Gaza, I don't want to send Israel another dime of any kind of funding for Iron Dome or anything else. Now, we do the work and we actually have a Palestinian state and Palestinians are free. Then maybe we could talk about that. But right now, with this going on, absolutely not.
What do you say to the person who will hear this interview and what they will hear is, well, if you supported the Iron Dome because you wanted Jews to be safe, even if you disagree with what's happening in Gaza right now, why would you want Jews to be less safe now by vis-a-vis not funding the Iron Dome? What do you say to that?
Yeah, I don't want them to be less safe, but there's no real way to make a distinction when you're sending arms money to Israel, right? So you send, like we just, I think, passed a bill that sent $14 billion to Israel in arms. That there's Iron Dome funding in that, but there's offensive weaponry in that as well. And so my point is, I'm not voting for any of that because I don't know what's offensive and what's not, particularly in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, and there's legitimate reason to question the trustworthiness of the Netanyahu government for sure. If Netanyahu leaves office, and at some point he will, everybody leaves office at some point. Some leave in handcuffs.
One would think.
Right. You know what? The last few years, it's hard to say, though, because we got some leaders around the world that just either ain't going without a fight or they ain't going at all.
Ain't going.
But post Netanyahu, post Trump, even when you think about what the future of Israel Palestine could look like, should look like, since this is such a big issue, apparently in a local race, what does a fair and just outcome look like? What does justice look like to you in Israel Palestine?
Freedom for the Palestinians, and whatever that looks like. I've heard two-state solution for a long time. When I was hearing it, I started to question it because I was like, this doesn't sound right. And we've been talking about it for a while and it hasn't happened yet. What's going on? And then when I went there, and actually felt what it felt like to be in the West Bank. And yeah, right. That feeling. It's like feel
it. Like it.
You feel it on your shoulders. Like it's like weighing down. It's like a spiritual weighing down. And so to feel that, and then to learn there's 700,000 settlers who have expanded here, right? I'm like, that's why this feels this way. It's like suffocating. And I don't even live there. So to feel that, it's like, okay, we don't seem serious about two-state solution. I don't know how we're rolling 700,000 settlers back. But, I don't know enough about it to get into the details of it. I've heard of, one-state solutions, confederacy. I don't know what that is. But I just know Palestinians need to be free and have equal rights and have self-determination. So to me, that's justice. And to me, that's the only thing that gets us to a place where, there's peace. And so let's get there. I don't know how we're going to get there, how long it's going to take, but that's my post, Trump, Biden, Netanyahu vision for it. But I also have a similar vision here, you know what I mean, in terms of like, the post-Trumps of the world, post-Bidens of the world. What does America look like? I think we need to start reimagining and thinking a lot about that.
And I want to ask you that before we go, but just one more question on this. Given what you say, given what the squad says, I think about all of that as a progressive vision. And then I look at other progressive candidates who seem, as I've written about in my book, except for Palestine, who seem progressive on every issue, who sound just like you until this issue comes up. I'm going to give you one specific example, and that is Richie Torres. How does somebody who seems to be on the right side of so many issues become Richie Torres on this issue?
Man, I don't know, man.
Y'all have to talk. I mean, y'all got a group chat and then meetings.
Yeah. I mean, the squad has a group chat. Richie Torres ain't in it, man. He's not.
Y'all got to be like, yo, he could be in this if not for this issue. Like,
yeah.
How does he end up in that? Like, and I don't want you to get into I don't want you to psychoanalyze him. I guess I'm just asking, how can someone be so progressive on so many issues and not see the injustice of what's going on in Palestine in the same way?
I don't know, man. I know for a lot of people, I don't know if this is Richie, but I have heard some things about him that maybe this is the case. Like, politics is like, it's a game, man. It's like, it's a job. It's a responsibility, but it's also like a political game. And there's like certain things you could do politically that will position you to be in some really important, powerful positions going forward. That I think many of my colleagues acquiesce to. And so, it's not just Israel as a state, it's the power of the Israel lobby, man. I mean, they have great influence, and they'll fund your campaign. I mean, regardless of like, whatever, if I came in on some tweeting in support of Israel all the time, like when I first got in,
he tweets like Netanyahu, like he's Netanyahu's long lost cousin.
Correct. So if I were doing that when I first got in, I would be my bank account, first of all, would be flushed, right? To the point where like people would really the left, because I would then be on the right, so the left would like not really want to challenge me because I would have a flush bank account. But then on domestic policy, I'm really strong in all of the other quote unquote progressive areas, and so if I wanted to just come in and just make sure I was good, I would just continue to tweet about Israel all the time. So I think that's what he's doing. I think he's trying to gain political power for himself towards an ultimate objective. I don't know if that's U.S. Senate. I don't know what it is, right? But it's something. Richie is very calculated in this way. You know what I mean? And so I think
it's more of a cynical ploy. Could the same criticism be made of Hakeem Jeffries?
I don't think so, but I'm biased. I like Hakeem a lot. You know what I'm saying?
Richie though, like he's cool, and I like Hakeem too. He's good people. I think he's wrong on that issue. And look, there's room for people to be wrong on an issue, right?
Correct.
Hakeem could be sincere and sincerely wrong, as could Richie Torres. But what I'm hearing you say about Richie Torres is that there's something calculating and cynical about it rather than just a principled disagreement.
Correct. That's how I feel about the two of them. And again, I don't know either of them very well or long, but I came in Congress with Richie, so I have a little bit more time and space with him. And my time and space with Hakeem is always, it's always felt real, felt authentic, felt like a brother. We're around the same age. We pretty much raised in the same culture, both New York City, hip hop, all that. So it's a whole different thing with Hakeem. Richie, he just seems to be always plotting, always calculating something.
Okay. The polls right now, the last polls I saw were not favorable for you. but there was a large chunk of undecided voters. You're definitely still in the race, but where are you in terms of your hope, in terms of your belief that you can win this thing?
Yeah, man, I don't want to curse, but F that poll. You know what I'm saying? Like that poll was wild, man. So, when you look at the crosstabs, the majority of the people polled are over 60, and that's not really my base. And the majority are with my opponent on the issue of Israel, which we know in our really objective, comprehensive poll, 69% of the district supports a permanent ceasefire. So I don't know who they polled, but it is what it is. It seems to just be older and more conservative in general, right? And so that's what that is. We've had 22,000 conversations with people one-on-one, not 425, 22,000 conversations with people. And in those conversations, we are doing very well, doing very, very well. And it's because we have always, even when we ran against Engel and beat Engel, it was always about expanding the electorate and always about turning out new voters, inconsistent voters, voters who never vote in primary. That's who we talk to. That's who we organize. That's who we mobilize. That's who we govern for and with. And so this is a turnout race for us. And we always knew that. And that's why we had all those conversations over the last several months. And so, when election day comes the 25th, we like where we are going to be because, those 22,000 people and then some, we feel are going to support us in very, very big numbers. And then the Muslim community, who never gets polled because many of them just registered or are inconsistent voters, there's about 6,000 to 8,000 votes there, and so our people don't get polled. You know what I'm saying? That's just the way it is, and so we feel good about where we are based on our field work that we've been putting in for several months.
What do you say to the 21% that are undecided right now? What's your message to them about why they should choose Bowman?
I mean, my opponent, he is recruited by a lobby that focuses more on foreign policy than they do this district. That lobby is funded by MAGA Republican billionaires who literally supported insurrectionists in 2021. My background is education. My background is the working class. My personal mission is to make sure every person, child in our district has access and opportunity to the American dream. And that means we have to focus on them and center them in our governance. And we have to center our humanity as it relates to foreign policy. And if we do that, we have a democracy that works for everyone, not just some. And that's the ultimate mission. To have someone who is in the pocket of AIPAC, in the pocket of special interests, running for Congress and then governing in Congress for special interests is the opposite of what we need. That's how we got Donald Trump in the first place. We need working class, grounded people who come from the community and people who center humanity in our government. So that's who I am. That's what I represent.
I'm going to make a statement. I want you to tell me if you agree with it or not. So I'm speaking for me. I'm not speaking for Congressman Jamaal Bowman. I just want to ask him where he stands on this. I think that President Biden can beat Donald Trump, but I feel like he is not the best opponent because of his failure to articulate his victories, because of in some ways the lack of victories on some issues that we care about. And third, because he has allowed the Republicans to frame him and present him as a weak candidate, maybe someone who's past his prime, maybe someone who's not fit for office. All of that together makes this an unnecessarily uphill battle for Democrats. When you hear somebody like me say something like that, me, not speaking for Jamaal Bowman, when I say that, what do you say to that?
I hear you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I hear you, and I can't really disagree with you. It's what we have communicated to the White House, similar things.
Who's we, your campaign or the squad?
The squad as well, but my official office. Like we communicate with we have a liaison to the White House, and we communicate through that liaison to the White House, and we communicate sometimes directly to the president or VP. And so we've shared that. Like, not only have we shared the sentiment you just shared, but we've also offered our help and support to, inform the president, advise the president, even be a surrogate for the president, especially as it relates to young voters and voters of color, because there are wins to be articulated. There are things to be transparent about in terms of things we still need to do better on and work on. But the other thing that's kind of out of our hands is, the president's response to Netanyahu in Gaza. I think the president hasn't done enough to hold Netanyahu and Israel accountable. I think if we,
what would that look like?
I was just about to say,
what would that look like?
Not sending $14 billion in additional weapons to Israel. Like that right there. And I don't know what's going on in private conversations, but something to the effect of, we are not sending you another dime until there is a ceasefire and that humanitarian aid gets into Gaza, because famine is setting in. You're killing mostly civilians. This is not going to get rid of Hamas. We need a pathway to peace in a Palestinian state. That needs to be it. And of course, freeing of all the hostages, the ones in Gaza, but also those who have been detained in the West Bank that we never talk about, who have been detained unjustly, right? It's all of that. And so, but President Biden hasn't done that. And I know my colleagues in the squad have communicated to him, this is horrible in terms of the U.S.'s reputation on the world stage. And apparently that's the thing that moves him more than anything else. So hopefully he'll move further and faster. I know we have this tentative plan that still hasn't been fully agreed upon by all sides, but hopefully that happens soon and we begin the process of getting a peace. But what I'm not hearing or seeing is, okay, what does a Palestinian state look like if we're saying two-state solution? What is that? I'm not hearing that or seeing that, which again tells me we're only going to go so far. And what we're in danger of doing is nurturing the next iteration of a Hamas.
We've probably already done that after killing over 37,000 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip since October 7th, wounding over 80,000, with another 8,000 under the rubble, and considerable dehydration, starvation, etc. going on. I mean, if anything foments resistance and violence and distrust of the state of Israel, it's certainly what's happened since October 7th. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I think even the Israeli public would agree with that, many of whom don't agree with how Netanyahu has prosecuted this war. Before we go
real quick and just say something to that. And also, shout out to Jewish Voices for Peace, and shout out to Benny Ark, shout out to Americans for Peace Now, shout out to If Not Now, shout out to all of the Jewish organizations, brothers and sisters fighting for justice for Palestinians and holding Israel accountable. And I wanted to make this point because, Israel's a state claims to be a representation of all Jewish people, even though it's not. And so its behavior to the layperson can, scarily be blamed on Jewish people. And then that gives rise to anti-Semitism. And that's what's really problematic that I don't think is being discussed enough. And that's what I try to communicate to people as well. Like, listen, man, you got this state claiming to represent all Jews and the state is behaving badly. And again, the passing person will then say, oh, if Israel's like that, Jewish people must be like that. And now we got a rise in anti-Semitism. And that's something that we need to really take seriously and do a lot more about and speak a lot more about, because we absolutely do not.
I'm glad you said that, because there will be people who might watch this interview, who are watching right now, who are going to say, I've heard a lot about Palestine. I've heard a lot about freeing Palestine. I've heard a lot about liberation. I haven't heard much about protecting Jews, or even more specifically about anti-Semitism and its rise in the United States. What do you think about the rise of anti-Semitism in the United States as being reported by many groups? And what do we do about it?
Education, man. Education is always my go-to answer here. We gotta fight anti-Semitism and fight hate in all its forms at the same time. We're not really doing that. where we're claiming to fight anti-Semitism through the condemnation of people who are behaving in anti-Semitic ways, as we should condemn them, but we don't do anything beyond that. Like we got to do the next thing, which is like, okay, how much knowledge of Jewish culture, religion, history, persecution, et cetera, does the general public have? How do we change that? How is it similar to Islamophobia and the rise in that? What's happening there? How does anti-Black racism fit into all of this, including anti-Asian hate, including LGBTQ hate? Right? It's a response to hate and injustice and marginalization and harm to certain communities simply for who they are. We can respond to all of it at the same time, and we should. This binary, this scarcity mindset that we continue to be in, us versus them, is just leading us to our own self-destruction. And I just think we should be better, and we can be better if we have the courage to open ourselves up, to be vulnerable, to learn, to make mistakes. If we have the space to make mistakes, a lot of times we don't even have the space to make a mistake or know how to disagree. Critical thinking, creative thinking, figuring it out together, man, without harm, I think is an important first step.
An important first step. I know you got to run, Congressman. People want to know, with your next 2 years, if you are reelected and you get 2 more years, what's on your plate? What's on your agenda?
Man, I'm taking a vacation, first of all. I'm trying to find the Caribbean island or something. Let me get out of here for a little bit. We're on, I sit on education and labor, and I have this bill, Green New Deal for public schools, which is all about, really making investments in public school infrastructure, public school curriculum, the teacher pipeline, special education, all of it. And I really want to do everything in our power to move that bill forward. It's actually the Green New Deal bill, one of the Green New Deal bills that has the most co-sponsors. So I'm really, really proud of that. So we're going to really fight hard to push the Green New Deal for public schools, and then continue to fight issues of inequality as it relates to like racial justice and economic justice, whether it's, prison reform, healthcare, climate justice, reparations. We're going to continue to push there. And those are the areas we're going to keep fighting for and focusing on.
Well, sir, you have the fight of your life on your hands, but I don't know anybody who's better equipped for that fight than you. The people will decide the winner in this election, but I wish you luck. I don't have to pretend to be neutral here. I think you're the best candidate. I'm rooting for you. I'm going to tell everybody to vote for you. You might even find me in these New York streets with a microphone or a megaphone telling folk to vote for you. We don't agree on every issue. We agree on most of them, but even when we don't agree, there's no doubt to me that you're the better option in comparison to George Latimer. But I think the people will figure that out sooner than later. I just hope that it happens before the election and not after.
Early voting starts Saturday, June 15th. Goes for 9 days to the 23rd, then 1 day off, and then election day is June 25th, man. So we're gonna be in these streets all week, man. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Good luck, and I'll see you soon. Everybody, that was Congressman Jamaal Bowman, who is running for re-election in one of the most well-funded and bizarrely funded opposition campaigns. He's fighting against one of the most bizarrely and strongly funded opposition campaigns we've seen in Democratic primary history. Make sure you support, have your voice heard, register your voice, register your vote as soon as possible. No matter who you vote for, make sure you vote. Again, I have my opinions, but it's up to you to analyze the facts, look at the data, and see for yourself. I think the choices will become clear to you. That's it for Night School tonight. Everybody, thank you for watching so much. We have a separate War on Gaza report coming up right after this at 10:15 p.m. And we'll have a special office hours live tonight where we take live questions and answers from the Night School community. On that note, I want to thank you all for creating the Night School community. To do that more, all you got to do is hit the like button. When you hit the like button, You let the YouTube algorithms know that we matter, and you let them know that corporate media isn't the only game in town. So hit the like button all the time. Of course, also hit the subscribe button. The more people who hit the subscribe button, the bigger our footprint is in this digital space. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Also, make sure you share the content. Let the world know about the content that we have here on the channel. And if you're so inclined, please hit the join button. Become a monthly subscriber to the channel. When you become a monthly subscriber to the channel, you help us have a sustained budget to produce the content that you see, whether it's members of the squad, whether it's political prisoners, whether it's political education, whether it's breakdowns of contemporary news, whether it is the Classroom in the Cell podcast, whether it is the Coffee and Books podcast. There's so many things on this channel. I'm starting to forget all of them, but we're doing the best we can to produce high quality content for you. But to give you that content, we need your support. We don't have corporate donors behind us. We don't have billionaires funding us. We make this happen with the will and the support of the people, and that includes you. So if you can, hit the join button. You can become a monthly subscriber for as low as $3.99 per month right here on the channel. And if you can't afford a monthly commitment, we ask everybody to just pay that night school tuition. If everybody here watching right now were to just donate $10 for the month, we would meet our financial goals. If everybody watching right now were to go to Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle, all of which are written right there, and you were to donate just $10, you would be able to help us meet our goals for budget, our goals for editing, our goals for what I call the building fund, helping us build that new big studio space. It all comes with your support. And I understand that everybody ain't got it like that. So if you don't got it like that and you can't afford to give us a financial donation, just hit the like button. Just hit the subscribe button. Just continue to spread the word and watch the content, because most of all, that is what's really important. So I want to thank you for watching Night School, and I'll see you next week. Peace.